This is the only time that you'll see me reading or referring to notes. I've memorised the sonnets, but I've written this myself, and it's always difficult to learn things that aren't written very well. But being over 70 and living on my own, I was in total isolation for the first 5 or 6 weeks of lockdown. Wasn't too bad, really. It was almost as if the telephone had been reinvented, and I was talking quite a lot to my son and to friends. But I did realise that after a week or so of not having a single face-to-face conversation with anyone, I was going to need some kind of all-absorbing project. And I'd been asked to play Polonius in Hamlet at the Young Vic, which was scheduled to start rehearsal in March and would be in production now. It's now the end of August. But that had obviously been shelved and rescheduled for sometime next year. So I'd been learning that, but it seemed pointless to continue with that now. But Shakespeare was kind of banging about in my head. Those insidious rhythms get you. And the sonnets were very much in the air. It was almost as if people were turning to them in a kind of patriotic way. In a time of need, people turn to the national poet like they turn to Elgar. I mean, I couldn't really understand it because the sonnets are really, when you look at them, they're quite difficult, and they're not remotely patriotic. They're not like John o' Gaunt's speech in Richard II or something. Anyway, they were everywhere. People were reading them online. I read somewhere that Judi Dench was trying to learn them. There was a Knight of the Realm who was going through them online, reading them one a day. But the thing was, he was reading them. And I thought, what if I were to memorize them? Just as many as I could before lockdown finished. I didn't think at that point that I would perform them or even show them to anybody. So I memorized about 12, and then having got to about 12, I sort of thought, well, how do I know that I've retained the first one? So I went right back to the beginning and I did the whole 12 again, and then I thought, this is fucking ridiculous, because I'm not going to be able to do this all the time. I'm not going to get to sonnet 50 and then think, right, I'm going to go back and do them all again just to make sure they're all there. And at this point, I became reconciled to the fact that there wasn't going to be a moment when I knew them all, that they weren't all going to be in my head, that I wasn't like some memory man from the circus, some sort of freak like the man in the 39 Steps. So I realized that what I wanted was a kind of archive, a record of the day when I knew that particular sonnet. And I thought, well, I'll record them on my mobile. And I did it in a pretty primitive way. I'll show you. I got a stack of books there, and I just put them on my kitchen island, and then I put this honey pot that was a souvenir from Greece on the top of the pack of books, and then I lent my mobile. On it, and I've changed now. I've become super sophisticated. I've got myself a little stand for the mobile. I've kind of come into the 25th, and I'm putting it back on the stand now. So I hope it doesn't. Anyway, it's on the stand now, and because someone said to me after I'd done about 70 sonnets, you should get a stand, you fucking idiot. Anyway, I've got a stand, and I'm now really motoring. So anyway, I've forgotten. Yeah, I think I should talk about the sonnets themselves. That's enough about me. And I'm not an expert. I'm not a scholar. I'm not a poet. So I'll tell you some of what I know about them, and I have found out a considerable amount. There are 154 of them, and they were all written in the 1590s, probably between about 1592 and 98, when Shakespeare was between the ages of about 28 and 35. So he's quite a young man. Although they do feel quite often as if they're written by a much older man. In Sonnet 73, that time of year thou mayst in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang upon those boughs, etc. It feels as if it's written by some old geezer, someone of my age. But he had this remarkable power of empathy and ventriloquism, as we know. Now I've lost my place again. The first 17 of the poems are often referred to as the procreation sonnets, and they're all exhorting this young man. Did I say the first 126 are dedicated? No, I don't think I did. Are dedicated to a young man called Mr. W.H., and nobody has the faintest idea who he was. Well, the first 17 are often referred to as the procreation poems, and in them he's exhorting the young man to procreate, to get an heir, so that his great beauty might never die, but be carried on after him in the form of somebody who looks like him. And they're quite elegant and very resourceful, but they're a little bit formulaic, and it's almost as if they might have been written to commission, maybe by the young man's mum. But at Sonnet 18, it all changes, because Sonnet 18 is probably the most famous love poem in the English language. It's Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day, written, I would remind you, to a young man, not to a young woman. Well, I didn't know that, actually, I don't think, until I started doing them, but undoubtedly written to a young man. But it's almost as if that poem changes because the theme of procreation is not included in that poem, because Shakespeare is now promising that he will secure immortality for the young man through his art, through his verse. Or it's funny, isn't it? I mean, just as a sort of footnote, I don't think he did achieve immortality for the young man, because nobody knows who he was, but he achieved immortality for himself. Anyway, it's as if this poem is, everything sort of hinges on number 18. Because after this, the poetry becomes much more heartfelt and open and raw and enraged and engaged and vulnerable. Perhaps he fell in love with the young man round about the time that he wrote Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day. The poems are like little playlets. They're like sort of 14-line talking heads type monologues in which he explores all the pain and the crazy glory of being in love, and all the coping mechanisms, which I think we tend to think of as very modern, just because we have modern words for them, but they've been around since the Greeks. I mean, I'm thinking of things like self-denial, about things like denial and passive aggression and manipulation and control and ambivalence. They're all there in the sonnets. Sometimes 2 or 3 of those qualities in one sonnet, and they have little mood swings contained within the sonnets. They're remarkably economical. And then there are mood swings between the sonnets that are terribly interesting, like in Sonnet 55. It begins with the most fantastic assertion of his self-worth as a writer. Not marble nor the gilded monuments of princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme. And then in Sonnet 72, which is only 17 sonnets later, the penultimate line is, I am shamed of all that I bring forth. I think I might have slightly it's actually, I am shamed at that which I bring forth. So he's suddenly no confidence at all in himself as a writer. So he's like a sort of master of mood swings. And he plays, he sort of challenges himself to play virtuosic games with language. In Sonnet 40, I think it is, it's a 14-line poem. He uses the word love 10 times, and in the first 6 lines he uses the word love 8 times. It's terribly difficult to learn, but very satisfying. And then I think it's Sonnet 66, I can't remember. The word and begins 10 sentences in that poem, and each of those lines with and at the beginning is a reason for killing himself. And it's a much more aggrieved and angry look at suicide than Hamlet's contemplation of it in To Be or Not to Be. And then the 14th line, the last line of that poem is a very compelling reason, thank God, for not killing yourself, or I suppose his career might have ended there. They are a remarkable document. They're a record of a mind looking at itself in all its moods, and looking at itself with a mixture of wry irony and raw introspection that I tend to think of, having done about 20 Shakespeare plays, as peculiarly Shakespearean in its flavour. But they are difficult and challenging to do, and I accept to listen to. And a friend of mine suggested that I put a little explanation of each poem on online before the poem, and I'm not going to do that because I don't have the time or the inclination, or I think the equipment, the authority to do that. But I would like to recommend a book to you, which has been a huge help to me while I've been doing this project. It's a book called Reading Shakespeare's Sonnets by the poet Don Patterson, which it manages to be both irreverent and scholarly. And while we're on the subject of thanking people, and I'm thanking Don Patterson, who I've never met, I want to thank a young guy called Richard Sutton, who I've also never met actually, but spoken to on the phone, who has really been responsible for me managing to get this thing online. He's helped me with the website. He's just brilliant, and every week he puts sonnets online, and he's had to put up with some highs and lows from me, which have reflected, I think, Shakespeare's highs and lows to some extent. Anyway, God bless you, Richard, and thank you very much. We're halfway through now, well, more than halfway through. I've done over 77, and I don't know whether the glass is half full or half empty, but I do know that I have found my all-absorbing project. I'd call it a passion or a mission, even, to do all these sonnets and to raise some money while I'm doing them for Amnesty International. Sometimes I think they've kept me sane during this very difficult period, but I think some of my friends wouldn't agree with me. I think some of my friends think they've driven me nuts.